My TIP lesson plan will be covering rhetoric and nonfiction pieces, specifically notable speeches, famous historical speeches that will be given to the students. And this will be building on previous classes that have already covered the art of rhetoric and the key terms from those classes. And I chose this topic because I didn't really want to focus on grammar, and around the time I was brainstorming, my brother, who's in 6th grade, was preparing for a small speech, and that really reminded me that rhetoric is a large part of public speaking. And it shows both performance in the text, you're performing this speech, and it shows when you use rhetoric as well as just when you're reading it on a page. And I'm focusing on 8th grade as my grade level because it's a time where students are preparing for the future and looking at high schools and often attending interviews and applying for scholarships. And that's where an understanding of rhetoric and its devices can really get students a leg up among their peers when they're kind of in that challenge. And this lesson is going to cover standards like cite textual evidence, as well as analyze the purpose of information presented in diverse media. And these standards relate to rhetoric because they require an understanding of rhetoric as a persuasive speaking and a persuasive writing technique. And this understanding needs to be applied in order to evaluate the motive of the speaker and how word choice and devices accomplish the speaker's motive. My lesson plan incorporates student and teacher standards. For example, under the student standards, 1A, apply existing knowledge and generate new ideas. Students are going to be looking back at prior knowledge from class and using that knowledge to annotate speeches given to them. Teacher standards, I looked at 2D, provide students with multiple and varied formative and summative assessments. Summative assessments will be Kahoot, which is very similar to Socrative, as a kind of check for understanding. And then a summative assessment later on, probably not in this lesson plan specifically, is going to be ThingLink as a sort of ongoing project for me to know that to keep track of student understanding. And ThingLink is sort of a way to apply that knowledge, like I said, and incorporate outside sources to substantiate annotation. And students will be able to provide retention of key terms under the SWBOTs, or students will be able to, or objectives. They're going to use the retention and use those terms to analyze and annotate famous speeches. And the annotating is going to allow students to determine motive, draw on inferences, and evaluate the speaker that's given to them. As my do now, I'm going to open up the class with a Kahoot, which, like I had said, operates a lot like Socrative, and it uses sort of a smart response technology with phones, iPads, computers, and students are given a sort of a key, a PIN number to log in and take the quiz, and they see each other's responses in real time, but they'll probably be using some sort of like code for themselves. Like in high school we had lunch codes, and that's what we used for anything like this, so that nobody knew who each other was. And so that's going to have them go through 10 questions, about 10 seconds apiece, to kind of ensure that they're understanding the topic before we really delve into it. And once that happens, once we're done with the sort of bell ringer, I'm going to open up the floor for students to explain why a speech is great, and perhaps how we can fail at speaking publicly and using rhetoric. And that's going to kind of segue into the modeling, the EDU model. I'll be taking a speech from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, just a small portion of it. can just kind of show them what I'm looking for, and kind of go through the process of annotation, pulling out key phrases and terms and words and things that kind of tell me as a reader what this is about. So for example, I looked at what's the word consecrate. It's a very religious term, and it's kind of an appeal to faith on President Lincoln's part. Great task as a sort of call to action to solve the conflict between those states. I also showed the incorporation of outside sources through an image of Lincoln at the speech, or giving the speech at Gettysburg, as well as a link to kind of show anaphora, which is a piece of figurative language, which is the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of a sentence or a paragraph or something. And so once we are finished going through annotation, I'm going to let students go into groups and learn from each other that way. And then after that, we're going to kind of break off into groups and do our own thing. Students are going to be given their own speech to annotate, like I had with the Gettysburg Address. And so this is an example of some student work that I'd like to see, looking at Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech. And for example, I put in a piece by Alice Walker and a link from the PBS about the different experiences between male and female slaves. And this is annotation that kind of shows an analysis and synthesis of information, especially through rhetoric and focusing on the nuances there. And once we're done with individual work, I'm going to end class with a post-test through another Kahoot. This is not going to be a quiz, it's going to be a discussion, asking the question, what makes this speech great? This speech being President Reagan's famous tear down this wall at the Brandenburg Gate. And so students are going to have 2 minutes actually to kind of look over this speech, and all they have to do is answer whether they believe their evidence is the ethos or a sort of call to action in this speech. And after we go through and everybody has voted, students will have to kind of substantiate that claim by pointing to the text and giving their reason as to why they chose what they chose. And this kind of allows me to formatively assess their comprehension and application of a topic that is really crucial in high school, especially in 8th grade when everybody's not quite prepared or a little worried for the future.